Old houses remember things. They hold on to footsteps long after people stop walking them. They keep the sound of laughter, the smell of morning tea, and the warmth of hands that once touched their walls. My house remembers more than I sometimes wish it did. I know every board that creaks underfoot, every crack that snakes across the plaster, and every window that lets in a draft. If I close my eyes and stretch out my hand, I could find the light switch, the doorknob, even the loose nail near the pantry without thinking. Sometimes I feel as though the house doesn't just belong to me, I belong to it. On certain mornings, I catch myself believing this old house knows me better than my own daughter does. The day began like so many others. I woke up just before 6. The habit of a truck driver who spent 35 years chasing the sunrise across highways. Even 10 years after retirement, my body refuses to sleep in. I made myself a cup of tea, the way I always do, and settled by the window. From there, I can see the rooftops of the neighborhood. As the sun stretched its arms across the sky, it painted the shingles and chimneys in soft gold. Pittsburgh wakes slowly, like an old man stirring from a nap, and I like watching it happen. It was Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday, at least at first glance. The tea ritual started after Ottilia passed. We never spoke much during those mornings, not because there was nothing to say, but because silence was enough. She would curl her fingers around mine, and we would simply sit there, side by side, letting the dawn wash over us. That quiet meant more than 1,000 words. Now I sit alone at the table, the steam rising in a single curl from my cup, and sometimes I feel her presence in the room. 6 years have gone by, but I still half expect her to step into the kitchen, brushing back her red hair with that sleepy smile. The sharp ringing of the phone broke that thought, dragging me back into the present. I didn't even need to check who it was. Only one person calls me this early on a Tuesday morning. "Good morning, Maeve," I said, lifting the receiver. "Daddy, what's taking you so long?" came my daughter's impatient voice. She always sounds as if I've already done something wrong before the conversation has even begun. I worry when you don't answer right away. I stayed quiet about the fact that the phone had only rung twice. No point in correcting her. Instead, I said, "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I was just enjoying my morning tea." "Tea again?" "Dad, the doctor told you to watch your blood pressure. Caffeine isn't good for you. Green tea barely has." "Any caffeine?" I replied gently, though I knew it wouldn't matter. With Maeve, the point isn't whether I'm right or wrong. The point is that she needs to correct me. "Never mind that," she cut me off. "Barnaby and I will be stopping. By this evening, around 6, there's something important we need to discuss." My heart sank. These days, something important usually means only one thing. Another attempt to convince me to leave this house and move into a retirement home where, as they put it, professionals can take care of me. "Maeve," I said, my tone firm, "if this is about Sunny Hills again—" "Daddy," she interrupted, her voice tightening with that sharp edge that always makes me feel cornered. "We just want to take care of you. At your age, it's dangerous to live alone in a house this size. What if something happens?" "At my age?" I laughed, though there was no joy in it. "I'm 68, not 100. I can still run a mile faster than Barnaby can walk half of one, beer belly and all. Nothing's going to happen to me. I've got a panic button, and Elizabeth checks in every day." "That old woman?" Maeve scoffed. "She'll be needing a nurse herself soon." I didn't bother arguing. She finished briskly. "Fine. We'll discuss it tonight, and Dad, please make some proper appetizers. Those crackers with cheese last time were awful." The line went dead. I stared at the dim phone screen and sighed. When did my little Maeve, the girl who once curled up on my lap and begged for bedtime stories, turn into this sharp, bossy woman who makes me feel like I'm the child? I remember her laughter, rattling the glass panes in the window. These days, every talk feels like navigating a minefield. Left with my thoughts, I wandered upstairs. I paused at her old bedroom door, now just a storage room full of boxes stacked neatly against the walls. To Maeve, it's junk. To me, it's memory. Old toys, trophies, photo albums, the remnants of a time when the house felt alive. I pulled one of the albums from a box, its leather cover worn thin with years. On the first page, Ottilia and I stood in front of this very house, young and smiling. I was in my driver's overalls, she in her simple cotton dress, her red hair shining like flame. I was holding a sign that read, "Finally, a home, 1981. I remember the struggle to buy this place, how we pinched every penny, how Ottilia took evening sewing jobs even after long hospital shifts, how I drove extra routes until my bones ached. But we did it. The house wasn't new, not even then. Built in the 50s, in need of repairs, with walls that leaned and plumbing that complained. But it was ours, and that was enough. The very first thing we did was paint the front door bright blue. Ottilia laughed and said, "The door to happiness should be seen from afar." I turned the page. Maeve, just 6 months old, sleeping in her crib. Ottilia insisted her nursery face the east so the sunrise would greet her every morning. How many plans we made then. Plans for her childhood, her wedding, her own children playing in the yard. None of that came true. No grandchildren. Maeve and Barnaby say children would only get in the way of their careers. To them, this house isn't a home. It's an asset waiting to be turned into cash. I was about to close the album when a knock came at the door. It was Elizabeth. McCoy, my neighbor, smiling warmly with a basket draped in a plaid towel. "Good morning, Oswin," she said. "I baked a blueberry pie and thought you might enjoy a slice with your tea. Elizabeth is a treasure. She's been a widow for years, and she knows what it is to be left with silence after decades of companionship. We've become friends since Ottilia passed." "Come in," I said, moving aside. "You're just in time. The kettle's still hot." We sat in the kitchen, cutting pie and pouring tea into cups with faded golden rims. Elizabeth studied me carefully, over her glasses, catching the lines on my forehead before I could smooth them away. "Maeve and Barnaby are visiting tonight," I admitted. "They'll try again to send me off to that retirement place." "And what will you tell them?" she asked. "The same thing I always say, I'm not going anywhere." I took a sip of tea, though my hands shook. Though sometimes I wonder if they're right. Maybe I am too old to keep this house going. "Nonsense," Elizabeth said firmly. "You're only 68. You're strong and capable. And this house, it's not just walls and wood, it's part of you. You come, alive when you speak about it. You're not just living here, you're carrying its history forward." I nodded, grateful. Elizabeth always has the right words. Maeve says I'm clinging to the past. Maybe she's right, or maybe she's simply forgotten the value of roots. After Elizabeth left, I busied myself with chores. I vacuumed, polished, and even prepared Barnaby's favorite canapes, salmon and avocado, not just crackers and cheese. Still, as I worked, it felt less like I was preparing for a family visit, and more like I was bracing for an inspection. Maeve always finds something to criticize. Too dusty, too cold, too hot. By 5:30, I heard a car pull into the driveway. As usual, they came early, not out of kindness, but to catch me unprepared. "Daddy, are you home?" came Maeve's voice, sharp and commanding, followed by the jingle of keys. She still has a set, though I've hinted more than once that it's unnecessary. "In the living room," I called, adjusting the tablecloth. They entered, Maeve striding first. Barnaby, a step behind her. She looked polished, tall and slender, her hair wound into a perfect bun, her suit sharp and her lipstick brighter than her smile. Barnaby trailed after, short and pale, with a spreading bald spot and that awkward half-smile that always makes me feel tired. "Hello, Daddy." Maeve kissed my cheek, leaving a faint mark of red. Her words were kind, but her eyes gave me away, measuring me, assessing me, deciding that I was too thin, too pale, too old. "Hello, Oswin," Barnaby added, shaking my hand. "How's your arthritis?" I sighed. "I don't have arthritis. Never did. But Barnaby seems convinced I must collect every ailment age has to offer. Have a seat," I said, forcing a smile. "I made some appetizers." Maeve scanned the table, then gave a small approving nod. At least I got that right. "How are sales this month?" I asked, steering the conversation to safer ground. She works for a high-end real estate firm, and work is usually the only topic that softens her tone. "Excellent," she said, her eyes brightening with genuine pleasure. "I finally sold that mansion in Shadyside, the one I told you about. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, pool in the garden. Remember? The $2 million one?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She's been talking about that house for months. $2,100,000, she corrected proudly. She looked at Barnaby, and they exchanged, a glance heavy with meaning. And I knew then. It was starting again. Speaking of rising prices, Barnaby cleared his throat. "Maeve and I did a little research on the real estate market in your neighborhood." "Your neighborhood?" "Not your or our." It was like they'd already mentally separated me from this place. "Yeah." I tried to keep my voice neutral. "Prices have gone up here too," Barnaby continued. "A lot. Especially for good houses in good condition like yours." "That's good." I shrugged. "So I'd made a good investment 40 years ago." Maeve tapped her nails impatiently on the table. "Dad, you don't understand. This house is worth almost 5 times as much now as when you bought it. That's a huge amount of capital that's just lying around dead weight." "It's not so dead," I argued. "I live in it. But you could live in it much more comfortably." Maeve stepped forward. "Sunny Hills has everything you need. Medical staff around the clock, 3 meals a day, recreational programs, desert, and it costs only 1/3 of the price of your house," and said Barnaby. "The rest of the money can be invested or well spent it on things you like. Or give it to you," I finished mentally. "That's what this whole conversation is about." "I already told you I don't want to move," I said firmly. "I'm fine here. Dad, be reasonable." May have switched to her favorite argument. "Mom would want you to be safe, taken care of. She would have realized that at your age, it's not wise to live alone." Mentioning Aelia was a dishonest ploy, and Maeve knew it. I felt anger rising inside me, but held back. "Your mother wanted our house to stay in the family," I said quietly. "She talked about it before she died." It was true. Aelia had talked about the house often in her last days, how she loved every corner of it, how she hoped it would always be a haven for us. "Promise me you'll keep it safe for our family," she begged, and I promised, though I'm no longer sure I understood her correctly. Then May frowned. "Daddy, times change. Mom couldn't foresee how the real estate market would change. It's an unaffordable luxury to own a house like this now. It's not a luxury to me. It's a home," I repeated stubbornly. "Okay," May agreed abruptly. "Let's look at it this way. What if you could help your family and still have a comfortable old age? Wouldn't that make sense?" I was wary. May have never backed down so easily. What kind of help were we talking about? Barnaby and May have exchanged glances again. "You see, Dad," May began cautiously. "Barnaby and I have an opportunity to invest in a very promising project, but we lack the initial capital. That's it. It all makes sense now. And you want me to sell the house and give you the money?" I asked you directly. "Not give it to you, but invest it," Barnaby corrected. "It's a good investment, Oswin. In a couple of years, you'll have twice as much." I looked at my daughter. Once I could read her eyes like an open book. Now she was a stranger with an impenetrable gaze. "And what is this project?" I asked, even though I knew I wouldn't believe a word of it. Barnaby perked up. It's an innovative startup in the financial technology sector. We are developing a platform that will allow people to invest in real estate without buying an entire property. This is the future of the market. It sounded like another pyramid scheme. I've seen enough of these innovative projects in my life. How much do you need? I asked, just to find out the scale of their appetite. About 300,000 to start with, Barnaby answered carelessly, as if it were a small thing. That's about half the cost of your house after you've paid for the boarding house. For a few years. I exhaled slowly. 300,000. Half the value of the house that Ottilie and I had invested not only money in, but also a piece of our souls. I need to think about it, I said, realizing that it was effectively a rejection. Maeve realized that too. Dad, there's nothing for you to think about. It's a win-win for everyone. You'll get a comfortable life without having to worry about the house, plus a good profit in a couple years. We can grow the business. Everybody wins. Except for this house, which is going to be torn down to be replaced by an apartment complex, I said, watching my daughter's reaction. Maeve didn't blink an eye. Progress is inevitable, Dad. The neighborhood is changing. Soon there won't be any of these old houses left here at all. What about the promise he made to your mother? I asked quietly. To keep the house for the family? Maeve waved her hand irritably. Dad, you're taking everything too literally. What Mom meant was that you should use the house for the good of the family. And right now, the best way to do that is to sell it and invest in our future. I looked at my daughter and I didn't recognize her. When had she learned to manipulate words and feelings so cleverly? When did material possessions become more important to her than memories and promises? So, I really need to think about this, I repeated firmly. This is a big decision. Of course, Daddy Maeve smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait. When they left, I sat in the silence of the living room for a long time. It was getting dark outside the window, but I didn't turn on the light. In the semi-darkness of the room, I thought I could see Ottilia's silhouette in her favorite chair. Promise me you'll keep it for our family. Her voice echoed in my head. But what if Maeve is right? What if Alia didn't mean the house itself, but what it could give our family? What if by clinging to these walls, I was betraying the true meaning of her request? I walked to the window and looked out onto the dark street opposite in Elspa's house. A warm light was burning. She must be waiting for tomorrow morning to find out how our meeting went. What am I going to tell her? That my own daughter only sees me as a source of funding for her husband's dubious schemes. At that moment, for the first time, I seriously considered for the first time that maybe it was really time for me to let go of this house. Not to move into a boarding house or to invest in Barnaby's project, but for my own sake, to let go of the illusions of a family happiness that no longer existed. It was a chilly morning. October Pittsburgh greeted me with low clouds and a drizzle that seemed to penetrate my bones. On days like this, I felt Ottilia's absence especially keenly. She always had a way of making even the cloudiest day brighter by making ginger tea, pulling out an old woolen blanket, and we would listen to music together while the rain drummed on the roof. It had been 3 days since Maeve and Barnaby's visit, but their offer to sell the house and invest in their project was still on my mind. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, and it wasn't just my attachment to the house. I decided to go for a walk, despite the weather. I pulled on the old raincoat Ilia had given me for my 60th birthday and stepped outside. Cold drops immediately danced on my hood. My path lay toward the center of town. On Fridays, I usually went into the old bank on Market Street to withdraw some cash for the week and to have a word with Felix Gastrell, an old friend of mine. We met back in the 80s when I was taking out a mortgage on a house. Felix was a young professional then, and now he is the head of the lending department. But unlike many, the high position did not spoil him. He remained as friendly and honest. The bank met me with silence and cool, air-conditioned air. Despite technological progress and the possibility to withdraw money from any ATM, I prefer to do it the old-fashioned way or through a cashier. Maybe it's old-fashioned, but I like human interaction, even if it's only fleeting. Snalm. Good morning, Mr. Sallow. The young cashier smiled. The usual. Good morning, Emily. Yes, the usual. I nodded, holding out my card. While she processed the transaction, I looked around. Felix was nowhere to be seen, and that made me a little sad. I was hoping to have a word with him. Looking for Mr. Gastrell? Emily caught my eye. He's in his office today. Said if you came by to invite you in. That was unusual. Usually we met in the common room and chatted standing up, but this was a formal invitation to his office. Is something wrong? I asked, taking the money in the card. I don't know, sir. Emily shrugged. He just wanted me to tell her. Felix's office was at the end of the hall. I knocked, and when I heard the familiar come in, I opened the door. Oswin. Felix rose from his desk to shake my hand. It's good to see you, my friend. Felix was a little younger than me. He had recently turned 62, but he looked much older. Years behind a desk hadn't been good for his figure, and the constant stress had left deep wrinkles on his face, but his eyes remained lively and penetrating. Have a seat. He pointed to the chair across from him. Coffee? No, thanks. I sank into the chair. Emily said you wanted to see me. Felix nodded, suddenly serious. Yes, I wanted to talk to you informally. He lowered his voice. It concerns your son-in-law, Barnaby Tumbler. I tensed up. Barnaby and Felix were unlikely to have crossed paths unless, is he a customer of your bank? He was. Felix pursed his lips. Look, Oswin, what I'm about to say is not exactly in accordance with our confidentiality policy, but we've known each other for 30 years and I consider you a friend. I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't say something. You're scaring me, Felix. I tried to smile, but it wasn't very convincing. Your son-in-law is in serious financial trouble. Felix interlocked his fingers on the table. A month ago, we denied him a large loan. It was the 5th rejection in the last 6 months. I felt a chill run down my spine. The 5th? But why would he need so many loans? According to the documents he'd provided, it was for business development. Some kind of financial platform. Felix shook his head. But the thing is, his previous loans are already overdue. He's rebearing from some banks to pay others. A classic debt trap. I remembered a recent conversation I had with Maeve and Barnaby. $300,000 for an innovative startup. It all made sense now. What about their house? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. It's mortgaged to the highest bidder, Felix confirmed. That's not all. After we turned him down, Barnaby went to private lenders. You know those guys who don't care much about credit history but charge huge interest rates. Loan sharks, I said grimly. Exactly. Felix sighed. Oswin, I don't know what's going on in your family and I don't want to interfere, but if Barnaby approached you for money, be careful. I nodded, digesting the information. So, it's not about a prospective business. They just need money to cover their debts, and to do that, they're willing to put me in a nursing home and sell the house that Maeve grew up in. Thank you, Felix. I looked him in the eye. You may have just saved me from a very big mistake. We talked some more about the weather, about Felix's children, about his plans for retirement, which was due in a year. But my thoughts were far away. I was trying to figure out if Maeve knew the reality of the situation. Could it be that Barnaby was hiding the extent of the problems from her? Or had they both decided to use me as a last chance to avoid financial ruin? As I left the bank, I felt the rain intensify, but I didn't feel like going home. I needed to think, and I think best when I'm on the move. I headed towards Shenley Park. Despite the weather, the park was deserted, only the occasional lone jogger in brightly colored raincoats. I walked along the wet paths, listening to the rustle of droplets on leaves, and tried to put things in perspective. $300,000, half the value of my house. For me, it was a fortune accumulated through years of hard work. For Barnaby, It was just a way to temporarily plug a financial hole that appeared to be getting bigger. And Maeve, has my girl turned into a calculating predator ready to rob her own father? Or was she also a victim of circumstances entangled in the net woven by her husband? Reflections interrupted. The phone call. Elizabeth's name came up on the screen. Oswin, darling, where are you? Her voice sounded concerned. I came to see you, but you're not home. It's raining outside. I'm in Shenley Park, I answered. I thought I'd take a walk. In this weather, Elizabeth clearly didn't approve of my choice. You'll get soaked to the skin and sick. Come back at once. I've made dumpling soup. I'll bring you a hot portion. It was useless to argue with Elizabeth. Besides, the prospect of hot soup and friendly conversation seemed very attractive now. All right, I gave in. I'll be home in 20 minutes. When I returned, Elizabeth was already waiting for me on the porch under a large umbrella, thermos in hand. My God, you look like a wet chicken, she exclaimed as I approached. Get inside and change. I didn't argue. Elizabeth walked me to the door, waited for me to open it, and followed me into the house. Go take a hot shower and I'll heat up some soup, she commanded, heading for the kitchen with the confidence of someone who knew where everything was. Minutes later, I was sitting at the kitchen table in front of a steaming bowl of soup, having changed into dry clothes. Elith sat across from me, watching me intently as I ate. It's delicious, I praised sincerely, sending another spoonful into my mouth. Grandmother's recipe. Elizabeth smiled. Simaton, now that you're warm and eaten, maybe you can tell me what's bothering you. I looked up at her. What makes you think anything is bothering me? Oswin sallow. Ellsworth looked at me sternly over her glasses. I know you well enough. Normal people don't walk in the pouring rain for no good reason, especially people your age, with your pragmatic approach to life. I sighed. Elizabeth really knew me well. We'd grown close over the years, and she was often the only person I could talk to. You're right, I admitted. I learned something today. Unpleasant about my son-in-law and, possibly, my daughter. It told about the conversation with Felix, about Barnaby's financial problems, about the attempt to get my money. With each word, Elsp's face grew more and more somber. Accum, bastards. She exhaled when I was done using my own father as an ATM machine. I'm not even sure if Maeve knows the whole truth. I tried to soften the situation. Maybe Barnaby is hiding the extent of the problem from her. Don't kid yourself, Oswin. Elizabeth shook her head. Maeve is not a naive girl. She's a realtor working with real estate and finance. She couldn't help, but noticed that their family budget was falling apart. I wanted to object, but I knew Elizabeth was right. Maeve had always been practical and attentive to detail. Financial problems of this magnitude could hardly have escaped her attention. I don't think I know my daughter very well, I admitted quietly. When did she become so calculating? Elizabeth gently covered my hand with hers. People change, Oswin. Sometimes not for the better, especially when it comes to money. Money often reveals a person's true colors. But this is my daughter. I felt a lump in my throat, my blood. How can she do this? Blood doesn't guarantee anything. Elizabeth sighed. My own sister hasn't spoken to him in 20 years because of our parents' inheritance. And we grew up together, sharing the same room, the same toys. I knew the story. When Elizabeth's parents died, leaving a small house and some savings, my sister demanded to sell everything and divide the money. Elizabeth wanted to keep the house, where their childhood had passed. The conflict ended in a complete breakdown of the relationship. And what are you going to do? Elizabeth asked after a pause. I don't know, I honestly answered. I don't know yet. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. She squeezed my hand. Just remember, your house is your house. You don't have to sell it if you don't want to, and you don't have to save Barnaby from the consequences of his own decisions. I nodded gratefully. Elizabeth's support meant more to me than she could have realized. After she left, I sat in the living room for a long time, looking at the family photos on the walls. Maeve as a baby, smiling with two pigtails on a swing I'd made for her myself in the backyard. Maeve as a teenager, serious in a prom dress. Maeve with Barnaby on her wedding day, happy, beautiful, full of hope. When did everything change? When did my loving daughter turn into a woman willing to manipulate her father for money? The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my musings. Maeve stood on the doorstep, drenched from the rain with a tense expression on her face. "Daddy, can I come in? We need to talk." I stepped back silently, letting her into the house. Something in her voice, in her look, was off. Usually confident, now she seemed scared. "What's wrong?" I asked as we walked into the living room. "Baby's not home," she said quickly, nervously. "He hasn't answered his cell phone since lunch. I thought maybe he'd stop by to see you." "No," I shook my head. "I haven't seen him." Maeve sank into a chair, clutching a wet umbrella in her hands. "Something's wrong, Daddy. I can feel it. He never disappeared like that." I watched my daughter trying to figure out if her concern was genuine or part of some new scheme. "Maybe he had a business meeting," I suggested cautiously. "Friday night?" Maeve shook her head. "Besides, he'd give me a warning. He always gives notice." I decided to test my hunch. "Maeve, does Barnaby have you financial problems?" She flinched and looked up at me. "Why are you asking?" "Just a guess," I shrugged. "Your sudden desire for me to sell the house and invest in your business. It looks as if you need the money urgently." Maeve turned pale. "He told you?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "No one told me anything." I sat down across from her. "But I'm not blind, Maeve. And I'm not stupid, even though you seem to think you are." Maeve lowered her head. For a moment, I thought I saw my little daughter caught up in a prank. But this was a grown woman involved in an attempt to deceive her own father. "It's not what you think," she finally said. "Barnaby's really growing the business. It's just we need more time. Investors demand guarantees. Banks refuse loans without sufficient collateral." "So, you decided to use my house as collateral," I finished for her. "The only problem is the house belongs to me, not you. Daddy, you're being unfair." Tears glistened in M's eyes. "We didn't want to oust you. We offered a mutually beneficial solution. You'd get a comfortable life in a boarding house and a share in the business. A business that was up to its eyeballs in debt. I didn't hide the fact that I knew the truth. Barnaby owed the banks, Maeve, and not just the banks. He went to loan sharks." She turned even paler. "Where did you—" "It doesn't matter." I shook my head. "What matters is that you tried to pull me into this adventure. Used my love for you, my memories of Ilia." "For what, Maeve?" "For money. You don't understand." She jumped up from her chair. "We're in desperate straits. If Barnaby doesn't find the money by the end of the month, we'll lose the house. And that's not all. These people who gave him the last loan, they're not the kind of people who just sue for non-payment. That's it." The fear for her husband was real. Barnaby had gotten involved with dangerous people, and now he was paying for his stupidity. "How much do you owe them?" I asked, already guessing the answer. "About 300,000 with interest." Maeve lowered her eyes. "Daddy, I know it sounds awful, but we really don't have anywhere else to turn. 300,000? Exactly the amount they wanted from the sale of my house, not for business development, but to pay off their debts. Why didn't you tell the truth right away?" I asked quietly. "Why all those lies about the investment in the boarding house?" Maeve turned away, staring out the window at the wet street. "Barnaby thought you wouldn't agree to help if you knew the truth, that you'd despise him for his mistakes. And me too. Did you? What did you think?" "Yeah." She hesitated. "I didn't know what to do, Dad. I was afraid. I still am." At that moment, her cell phone rang. Maeve flinched and hurriedly pulled it out of her purse. "Barnaby." Her voice trembled. Where are you? What? Oh my God, I'll be right there. Don't go anywhere. She ended the conversation and turned to me with a face white as chalk. I got to go, Barnaby. He's in trouble. These people found him. What happened? I stood up, feeling my insides tightened with worry. Despite everything, Barnaby was my daughter's husband. They beat him up. A warning, they say. May frantically packed her bag. We have 3 days to find the money. Otherwise, she didn't finish the sentence. Where are you going? I asked, following her to the door. To the Blue Oyster Bar on Fountain Street. Barnaby's there. She turned around in the doorway. Dad, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for things to turn out this way. After she left, I stood in the hallway for a long time listening to the rain drumming on the roof. The situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Barnaby didn't just owe money to the banks, but to some gangsters who wouldn't stop at violence. And Maeve, my daughter, was being dragged into this dangerous game. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed number. Elizabeth, it's me again, I said, when she answered. Remember when you asked me what I was going to do? I think I know the answer now. I realize I had to act quickly. Not for Barnaby's sake, who had created this situation himself with his own reckless decisions. And not even for Maeve, who was complicit in the deception, but for my own sake, to finally break the web of manipulation and start living my own life without the constant guilt and obligations to people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. Elizabeth listened to mew without interrupting and then said quietly, You made the right decision, Oswin. It's time to free yourself from this toxic relationship. Whatever the price of blood, it shouldn't cost you your freedom and dignity. And, in that moment, I realized she was absolutely right. It was time to take action. Thanksgiving had always been a special holiday in our family. Ottilia loved cooking turkey with cranberry sauce, baking pumpkin pie from her grandmother's recipe. Our home was filled with the aromas of spices and baked goods, laughter and conversation. Even after her death, I tried to keep this tradition alive. For the past 6 years, I've ordered food from a restaurant, but I still invited my family to get together. This year was going to be different. It had been almost 2 weeks since the night Maeve had come running to me with the news of Barnaby's beating. In that time, I hadn't heard a word from them. No calls or texts. I hadn't called either. It needed time to think about the situation and make a decision. And I made it. After long conversations with sleepless nights and agonizing deliberation, I knew what I had to do, but I was in no hurry to act. I wanted to see their faces again, hear their voices, make sure I wasn't wrong. So when Maeve called and suggested out of the blue that we celebrate Thanksgiving at my house, just like old times, I agreed. We'll all come, she said. Mari, me, Barnaby, Aunt Doris, and Uncle Harold, Cousin Miles and his wife. A big family dinner. Perfect timing for important decisions. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up with a heavy heart. The weather matched my mood. Gray skies, drizzling rain, piercing wind. I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the empty garden. Bare tree branches swayed in the wind. Wet leaves stuck to the paths. Ottilia had always said that even in the driest weather, there was beauty to be found. She saw it in everything. I wonder what she would say now, looking at our house, preparing for the last family dinner. The doorbell rang at 3 sharp. First to arrive were Aunt Doris and Uncle Harold, both in their 70s, but alert and active. Doris was Ilia's sister, the same red-haired, but with gray hair and the same ringing laughs. Harold is her husband, a former engineer, silent and thorough. They brought a bottle of wine and a homemade pie. Oswin, dear, you've lost weight. Doris hugged me. Are you eating well? Elizabeth makes sure I don't starve. Smiled as I helped them take off their coats. That neighbor of yours? Doris squinted, slightly. Is she coming tonight? No. I shook my head. It's just family tonight. Miles and his wife, Veronica, showed up next. Miles is the son of Alia's younger sister, a computer programmer, silent and shy. Veronica is his complete opposite, a boisterous and outgoing elementary school teacher. They brought a bottle of champagne and a box of chocolates. Uncle Oswin. Miles shook my hand firmly. It's been a long time. How have you been? I can't complain. I smiled, trying to look more carefree than I felt. A firm, "Comin' in. Make yourselves comfortable." Maeve and Barnaby were late. It wasn't her style. My daughter usually arrived at the exact time, or even earlier. We were already sitting in the living room discussing the latest news. When the bell finally rang, when I opened the door, I could hardly contain my surprise. Barnaby looked terrible, a black eye, an abrasion on his cheekbone, and he was moving gingerly, obviously in pain with every step. The marks of the beating Maeve had mentioned were still visible. My daughter, on the other hand, seemed unusually animated. She was holding a bottle of expensive whiskey, my favorite kind. "Daddy," she kissed me on the cheek. "Sorry I'm late." Traffic. Nodded silently, letting them into the house. There was something about Maeve's demeanor that made me uneasy. It was like she was preparing for a big speech. Nervous, with an overly bright smile. In the living room, Barnaby's appearance caught everyone's attention. "My God, what's the matter with you?" exclaimed Aunt Doris. "A little incident at work," Barnaby smiled. "Nothing serious." "It looks serious," said Uncle Harold. "Have you seen a doctor?" "It's all right, really." Barnaby clearly didn't want to pursue the subject. "Let's not talk about sad things. It's a holiday." Maeve immediately supported her husband, offering to open the whiskey they'd brought. I saw her fill Barnaby's glass to the brim, more than he usually drank. He drained it almost in one gulp. Nerves. I'd ordered dinner at the best restaurant in town, turkey, with traditional side dishes. Salads, appetizers. Everything was beautifully set on china dishes that Tilly and I had gotten as a wedding present. I set the table in the dining room, which we only used on special occasions. "Divine," Veronica exclaimed after tasting the turkey. "Oswin, where did you order?" "At the Golden Pheasant," I answered. "They specialize in holiday dinners." "It must be expensive," Barnaby said as he put a second portion on his plate. "But it's worth it." The conversation at the table flowed slowly. Uncle Harold talked about his new greenhouse. Aunt Doris bragged about her grandchildren's progress. Miles and Veronica shared their impressions of their recent trip to Europe. Maeve was unusually quiet, with only occasional remarks. Barnaby continued to drink. The whiskey was joined by wine brought by Doris and Harold. When the main course was finished, I suggested we move on to dessert and coffee in the living room. Everyone readily agreed. We moved to a cozier room, and I began pouring coffee into cups. Before we go any further, Maeve suddenly spoke, rising from her seat. "I'd like to say a few words." Everyone turned to her. I froze with the coffee pot in my hand, feeling my insides clench in anticipation of trouble. "Today is Thanksgiving," May began, looking around at everyone present. "Now, a day when we gather as a family and give thanks for what we have, but it's also a day when we think about the future, about making life better for all of us." She paused as if gathering her thoughts. "Daddy," may have turned tome. "You always taught me that family is the most important thing, that we should support each other in times of need. And right now, these are exactly those times for Barnaby and me." I set the coffee pot on the table, realizing where she was going with this. "Barnaby and I are in a difficult financial situation," Maeve continued, looking at the rest of the family, instead of at me. "Our business requires investment, and the banks refuse to lend to us without sufficient collateral." "What is your business?" Uncle Harold was interested. "I thought you worked in real estate?" "Yes, but Barnaby and I are developing A parallel project. Maeve smiled. A financial platform for real estate investments. A very promising direction. I noticed Barnaby fidgeting nervously with his napkin. His face was flushed, either from alcohol or tension. And what, the banks don't give money? Miles asked. There seem to be a lot of startup programs available. Now. Alas, they turned us down, sighed Maeve. The risks are too high, they say. But we're sure of success. We just need to get past the initial stage. How much do you need? Aunt Doris asked. 300,000, said Maeve. But we have a solution. She turned to me, and I saw in her eyes a strange mixture of determination and despair. Papa lives alone in this huge house. Maeve looked around the room, a house that requires more and more maintenance and repairs every year. At his age, it's becoming burdensome. I'm doing fine, I argued, but it was as if Maeve hadn't heard. We suggested that Dad move to a wonderful retirement community called Sunny Hills. It has everything you need: medical staff, organized leisure activities, socialization with peers. It sounds good, Veronica said cautiously. Many elderly people prefer such places to solitude. Exactly. Maeve perked up. Daddy will be much better off there than here alone. We can sell the house. Some of the money will go to pay for the boarding house and some of it will go to our business. In a couple of years, Daddy will get his share of the profits. Everybody wins. There was silence. I could feel the eyes of everyone present on me. They were waiting for my reaction. Maeve was looking at me too. Sure, that social pressure would make me agree. So, Mab, I spoke softly but firmly. We've already discussed this. I don't want to sell the house and I don't want to move to a boarding house. But why, Daddy? There was a pleading note in her voice. Think of us. Barnaby and I are desperate. You don't need this house, but it could save our lives. Don't exaggerate. I shook my head. Nobody's going to die because your business won't get investment. You don't understand. Maeve raised her voice. Barnaby took out a loan against our house. If we don't pay it back by the end of the month, we'll be on the street. Wait a minute, Uncle. Harold intervened. You want Oswin to sell his house to save yours? That's not very fair, is it? This isn't about fairness. Maeve began to lose her temper. This is about family. It's about helping each other. Daddy could help, but he won't. Maeve, Aunt Dora said gently but insistently. Oswin has the right to decide what to do with his house. It's his property. What about my inheritance? Maeve turned to her aunt. This house should rightfully pass to me after Papa's death. I'm just asking to get my inheritance now when I really need it.